position on this? I mean, he's not waiting for a deal.
I think
to
our
be
position on
arrived at.
Rafa, I really don't appreciate you side twisting my words or the words of the secretary or other officials up here.
I am
We've made our
quoting
point of
what the
view.
Prime Minister of Israel
I understand.
said.
I understand your question, and in response to your question and Daphne's question, and the number of times that we have been asked about a potential military operation into Rafah from up here, we have been unambiguous about the concerns that we have when it comes to the more than 1 million people seeking refuge in that region, when it comes to this region in particular in Gaza being an important conduit for the delivery of humanitarian aid, it being a region in which foreign nationals, at least at the beginning of this conflict, are able to use consistently for safe departure. So any kind of operation that does not address these concerns would be a non-starter for us. And you've heard me say this, you've heard the Secretary say this, you've heard Matt say this, you've heard Admiral Kirby, Karine, the President. We have been consistent on this.
Yeah. So would it be appropriate for the United States of America to say whether there is a deal or not a deal? We find that the storming of Rafah is unacceptable.
We have been pretty clear about that,
Very
Saeed.
clearly.
We have been very clear that any kind of military operation into Rafah that does not address these concerns would be unacceptable to the United States.
Now, I have a question on the humanitarian situation.
Uh-huh.
Officials at the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, they leaked a document that says that the Israeli government intently, sort of puts obstacles in the way of these humanitarian aid convoys or whatever getting through to Gaza. Are you aware of that report?
So I'm just not going to comment on leaked documents, Saeed.
Why won't you comment on this document?
I'm not going to comment on leaked documents, on things that continue to exist under a deliberative process. I will just say that the Secretary and the leaders of this administration, they hear a diverse range of views from across this department, from across the interagency. When it comes to processes that are within the deliberative process, we take those points of view into consideration. But beyond that, I'm just not going to speak to purportedly leaked documents.
Okay, would you agree that there is almost a common opinion among professionals and experts and so on that Israel is in fact, and the Prime Minister of Israel are in fact, take measures day after day to sort of make these humanitarian aids, including American portions of American aid.
I would disagree with your characterization. Julia.
Thank you. I know the State Department and Secretary Blinken have made clear that the ICC doesn't have jurisdiction, in your view, over the Palestinian conflict. But I wanted to get your response to remarks from Netanyahu just today, especially in context of the conversation we just had about the campus protests. He said, branding Israel's leaders and soldiers as war criminals will pour jet fuel on the fires of anti-Semitism, those fires that are already raging on the campuses of America and across capitals around the world. Do you agree with that assessment that it's anti-Semitic for the ICC to pursue Netanyahu? And what do you make of him connecting this to the protests?
Fundamentally, at the heart of this, Julia, we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction over this issue. And that's what the crux here. Beyond that, I'd let the Prime Minister and officials within the Israeli government clarify or offer any commentary on his comments. But at the crux of this for the United States is that we do not believe that the ICC has jurisdiction on this. That being said, we work closely with the ICC in a number of key areas. We think that they do important work as it relates to Ukraine, Darfur, Sudan. But again, on this particular instance, they just do not have jurisdiction.
And then, if I may, another on Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
There have been reports that Saudi Arabia has decided to normalize relations with Israel, but is waiting to determine when they do that based on the U.S. election and the results of the election. What do you make of Saudi Arabia potentially weighing this presidential election so much when the urgency is now?
So I'd defer to officials in the Saudi government to speak to their position. I'm not a spokesperson for them. What I can say from the United States is that we also have been unambiguous about how we feel that a a more integrated Middle East region is better for not just the interests of the United States, but it is better for peace and stability in the Middle East region. It is also something that we believe other officials across the Middle East region and Arab world view this as well. We are continuing to work this. We think that Israel's further integration in the Middle East region can unlock additional benefits. It can offer greater security, which is in the interest of the United States. It's in the interest of the people of Israel, and it's also in the interest of other partners as well. But of course, we also are continuing to stress and underline the importance of doing everything we can to reaching a deal for an immediate ceasefire, one that releases the hostages, one that allows a surge of humanitarian aid into the region as well. Go ahead, Nadia.
I don't know if somebody asked you about this or not, but I want to ask you about the Amnesty International report.
Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, Amnesty just published its report. I don't know if you've
Flood
seen it in
watch.
details, but they say
Oklahoma.
there is a reasonable evidence that Israel has committed war crimes, gross violation of human rights, and violation of international humanitarian law. I'm just wondering, I mean, with something as serious as this from a very reputable organization that normally use it to talk about rogue states, etc., when they finding and they publish their reports, why the State Department still now has not published anything to either contradict or to support other human rights organizations being talking about what's happening in Gaza?
So
What's the delay for?
first, I've not seen that specific report, Nadia, but I think you were in the briefing room just about a week and a half ago, in which we when we unveiled the 2024 Human Rights Report, in which there was in fact a section outlining Israel and the Palestinian territories. When it comes to the current conflict in Gaza, and I've spent a number of days talking about this, we are continuing to assess what is happening on the ground. We have a number of tools at our disposal to look into what is happening on the ground, and if required, hold appropriate and relevant parties accountable. You've heard us talk a great deal in this briefing room about Leahy. You've heard us talk a great deal in this briefing room about the Churg process. We continue to have those options as well as other avenues under the Foreign Assistance Act to look into these things. And as in any conflict zone, Nadia, this work is ongoing, and we are feeding into that process in close coordination with not just our embassies and consulates, but also civil society, independent media reporting of such things, and of course, NGOs as well.
Can you just assure us that actually you treat Israel the same way as you treat any other country that found in violation of international law? Because what we hear from you is all the statements and some actions, like we see with the settlers. But many believe that when the Prime Minister of Israel pick up the phone, call the White House, the finding is changed and delayed and pushed, just like we heard about even the Secretary. We were together in Italy when he assured us that we're going to hear about this report, about the Leahy report and the violation of using U.S. weapons. But we haven't heard about it. So I just wanted an assurance from you that actually
Well,
you're taking these things
I
seriously.
spent about 50% of the daily press briefing yesterday talking about it, so would take issue with how you laid that out. There are absolutely, we hold Israel to the same standard that we hold any country with, and that is with in Gaza, outside of Gaza, anywhere. International law, international humanitarian law needs to be followed, and it needs to be abided by. And when we find violations, or when we find issues that are concerning, not only do we raise them with the Israeli government, we will take appropriate actions consistent with the systems and tools that we have in the United States to take appropriate actions. I spent a great deal of yesterday talking about the Leahy process, in which we found 5 violations of gross violations of human rights. So when we see issues, we will not hesitate to take appropriate action. There is no different standard or different set of rules when it comes to any country on which we have a relationship with.
Okay, just one final
Yeah.
clarification. The secretary said that the offer they give to Hamas is generous. Who decide what is generosity? Is it the United States and Israel? What is it Arab partners in the Saudi summit that they decided is generous? I mean, I guess my question, how do you define what is generous?
So, Nadia, over
How
the
is
course
different?
of this conflict, we have seen Hamas move the goalpost, renege on agreements that they have made as relates to part of this deal. And so the secretary was simply underlining the fact that we are in this position in which Hamas has a generous offer on the table, and it's imperative for them to move and to act on it as swiftly as possible. Olivia, go ahead. Yeah.
Just one point of clarification on Leahy, which I know you amply addressed yesterday, but you mentioned yesterday that the process was open-ended, right? It was subject to the MOU that exists between the Israeli government and the United States. This new information that Israel has provided with regard to the 5th unit, can it continuously supply new information with regard to that unit until the U.S. sort of adjudicates in a particular direction, or is this a finite set of information on whose basis the U.S. will decide whether to take punitive
I would
action?
say the information is definitive, and it is more that consistent with the memorandum of understanding that we have. We are bound by that to consult and engage with officials in Israel on the process, on steps that they may or may not be taking, and we are assessing all of those things to ensure that they are in standard with what is laid out in the Leahy Law. And if not, as I said yesterday, there will of course be a resistance of a restriction on applicable U.S. assistance.
Okay, and then a separate question on aid.
Yeah.
The secretary from Jordan earlier mentioned the opening of new crossings into northern Gaza. I was hoping you could just update us on the overall metrics on the volume of aid that's going in and how that compares to what the U.S. believes is necessary.
So, look, we are still very much in the same place that we were when David Satterfield came and talked to you all. We have seen some measurable steps in the right direction. Northern crossings, including Erez and Zakim, are preparing to reopen. We are seeing that routes from Jordan and Ashdod are showing progress, but not fully yet realized. And southern crossings, specifically Kerem Shalom and Rafah, have seen some fluctuating numbers of trucks, but trending in the right direction. This is all to say that we still need to see more. And some metrics that I can offer is that on April 25th, approximately 303 trucks entered Gaza, according to the UN, 282 trucks via Kerem Shalom, and 21 trucks via Rafah. That is not nearly enough, but it is a step in the right direction. We want to continue to see more. And I know also we spend a lot of time up here talking about trucks and their inflows and outflows, possibly because it might be the most digestible metric out there it is when they're talking about this issue. But ultimately, when we talk about humanitarian aid, it is great to see trucks enter Gaza. It is even better when the humanitarian aid that enters Gaza is getting to the Palestinian people, to Palestinian civilians who need it. And we will continue to work closely with the government of Egypt, government of Jordan, government of Israel, and relevant NGO partners, including the United Nations, to ensure that that final step is happening and it's getting to the places it needs to go. Go ahead.
I've asked several times about the right to defend oneself for Palestinians, and out of this room we've heard that the U.S. does not exhibit any double standards. And today in the West Bank, the Israeli occupation forces chased, beat, and threw off a roof a 32-year-old man, Palestinian man, Hassan Mansia, near in the Hebron district. Also, the Israeli forces attacked at least 2 schools with tear gas, inside and outside schools in the Hebron and Jenin districts, where students were and teachers, and some of them experienced some suffocation. Since October 7th, we've had 95 miners that have been killed in the West Bank. I asked before, do Palestinians have a right to defend themselves? I'm not talking about rogue individuals. I'm talking about as far as a legal authority to defend Palestinians. Does the State Department view that Palestinians have a right and duty to defend themselves?
So, look, I have not seen those reports that you outlined. I'm happy to look into them, and I have no doubt our partners in the IDF may be able to share more. What I can say is that actions like these, if true, they are destabilizing. They contribute to a deteriorating security situation, and they are not in the interest of Israel's own security. And when we have seen actions like this, when we see actions from, we believe quite strongly that these kinds of activities take us away from a two-state solution, and they feed into further instability.
But does the Palestinian Authority have the right to defend its citizens?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely,
It
it
does.
does. Go ahead.
Follow up on the campus protests.
Yeah.
Question. You know, the U.S. government, everybody from President Biden on down to here at the podium, has been quick to call out anti-Semitism at these protests, but there's also been an enormous number of examples of Islamophobia and racism from counter-protesters. Why doesn't the administration denounce that as well? And would you
I
do
did.
that here?
You can check the transcript. I did.
Well, and let me ask you about Netanyahu's the news on Netanyahu today, where he said that even if there's a hostage deal, they're still going.
Ryan,
into
you gotta
Rafah.
be on time. You gotta come to the
Did you-
briefing on
did you
time.
get asked
I
about
spoke
that
to
this morning?
Too. Come on, man.
All
Go
right.
ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah.
Today, photos of prayer in Gaza were published. My question, will the Palestinian Authority, PA, be the one who will control this prayer?
Sorry.
The port.
Uh-huh.
Today, there is photos of this port published. I wonder if the PA, the Palestinian Authority, will control this port in Gaza?
I do not believe that the Palestinian Authority has a role in the maritime corridor, but I am happy to defer you to my colleagues at the Defense Department and USAID to speak to this process in a little bit more specificity.
Don't you think this port will build over the Palestinian territories, and should Palestinian people have the authority of this port?
So broadly, when we were talking about the future of Gaza and the future of a two-state solution and ensuring that Gaza is no longer a launch pad for terrorism against the Israeli people, part of that for us, of course, includes a Gaza that is reunited under the Palestinian Authority. But as it relates to this maritime corridor, I do not believe that they have a specific role. But that being said, my colleagues at the Pentagon and USAID may be in a better place to speak to some of the more logistical components of this. Okay. Go ahead, in the back.
Thank you, Vedant. I just wanted to ask about the Erez border crossing.
Sure.
It's obviously reopening in the north weeks after protesters' call with Netanyahu. What should we read into the timing of this opening, considering that Blinken is now there to request more aid and also this ceasefire deal hangs in the balance?
I would not read anything into the timing of this beyond us just stressing again that all of these things need to happen as swiftly as possible, but we also fully understand that there may be steps that need to be taken in when factoring in vetting, safety, other things as it relates to crossings that are used for the inflow of aid. We are not naive to the fact that this is a process, but look, we have been clear that we need this to happen as swiftly as possible.
And I just want to touch on some of the other questions as well.
Yeah.
Was it the US's aim to try to beat the clock on a Rafah invasion by getting this ceasefire deal in place beforehand? And if so, have Netanyahu's comments this morning altered that at all?
It's not about beating any clock. If you go back and look at the history and trajectory of this conflict, there have been a number of instances in which we have been hoping, encouraging, working tirelessly for a deal that would release the hostages that we hope would be partnered with some kind of ceasefire. That has been our position for quite some time. And simultaneously, as it relates to Rafah, it has also been our position for quite some time that any kind of operation that does not address the sort of various components of humanitarian concern that we have would be unacceptable to us. Yeah. Go ahead in the back.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much. Any comment on John Bass' trip to Doha and Islamabad? Was the meeting with Taliban official in his schedule?
So, as you so noted, Acting Undersecretary for Political Affairs John Bass is on travel to Doha and Islamabad. In Doha, he'll meet with senior Qatari officials.
Severe
and other
thunderstorm
diplomatic,
warning.
Missions to discuss
Iowa.
support for Afghanistan and other shared security interests in the region. And in Islamabad, we expect him to meet with senior Pakistani officials and discuss a range of regional and bilateral issues as well. Go ahead next. Yeah.
Thank you, Bill.
Yeah.
I know the State Department already talked about the Kurdistan region's local elections some time ago, as it's been scheduled for June 10th. So now there's a discussion that should be postponed for at least 3 months. So what's your comment?
So we understand that President Barzani and various Iraqi authorities and other political parties are actively considering next steps. From our point of view, we would encourage them to schedule free, fair, and timely elections, and we hope that process takes place. But I don't have anything to offer beyond that. Geeta, go ahead. Yeah.
Two separate topics.
Great.
At the White House Correspondents' Dinner on Saturday, the president called on Putin to release RFE/RL journalist Alsu Kurmasheva. I was wondering if the State Department is following up her case into seeing whether she can be identified as wrongfully detained.
So first, let me just say we have no higher priority than the safety and security of U.S. citizens overseas. And in the case of Alsu Kurmasheva, we remain deeply concerned about her detention in Russia. And to echo the president, we believe she should be released. And we condemn in the strongest possible terms the Kremlin's continued attempts to intimidate, repress, and punish journalists and other civil society actors. In terms of a wrongful detention designation, I'm just not going to get ahead of our process. There is a deliberative and fact-driven process underway. That process continues to be ongoing, and we constantly review circumstances surrounding detentions of U.S. nationals, so I don't have anything to offer there.
How often? Can you tell us how often you may review cases?
I am not going to speak to the specifics of this process.
Okay, another one on Burkina Faso.
Yeah.
Voice of America and BBC have been banned there. I was wondering if the State Department is doing anything in that regard.
So we are very alarmed that Burkina Faso's Superior Council of Communications has suspended multiple independent outlets, including Voice of America and BBC, for covering the Human Rights Watch report about some recent massacres. You've heard the Secretary say, including from this very podium, that far too many governments use repression to silence free expression, particularly against journalists and media organizations, for simply doing their jobs. Freedom of expression, particularly for media, is critical for accountable and transparent governance. Go ahead, Alex. Go ahead, Alex.
Thank you, Vinod.
You're interrupting your colleague, Shalil. I'm happy to come to you. I'm happy to come to you after. Alex, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Vinod. Can you please clear up, either validate or kill alive some of the reports claiming that the U.S. has eased some of the sanctions on Russian banks, including the central bank, to allow some energy-related operations? Why?
I'm not sure what reports you're referring to, Alex. What I can just say broadly, though, is that when it comes to our efforts to hold the Russian Federation accountable for its infringement on the territorial integrity and sovereignty of our Ukrainian partners, we have not taken our foot off the gas going back to February of 2022 since this invasion occurred, and we will continue to take steps both to continue to support our Ukrainian partners, but also through sanctions, export controls, and other measures, hold the Russian Federation accountable.
So there is no shift at all?
There is no policy shift at all.
Thank you. On Poland, Poland today handed official request to the United States to host nuclear weapons in Poland. Do you have any reaction?
I don't have any comment for you on that. I'm sure my colleague
starting in 2026. He has promised to let the Trump tax cuts expire. Isn't it true that President Biden is promising a $1,500 tax hike on a family of 4 earning less than $75,000 by that action?
The president has been very clear that no family earning less than $400,000 will face a tax hike. He's not proposed such a thing since he took office, and he's not proposing to allow that to happen when parts of TCJA expire.
So when you testified at the Finance Committee last month, you said, quote, the president does not have a plan to address the coming tax hikes. That was at the Senate Finance Committee last month. Isn't it true that without a plan, the president would slash the child tax credit in half, which means parents lose $1,000 from their pocketbooks for each child each year?
The president has principles that will guide his negotiations with Congress over how to handle this, and his principles has made clear that he opposes increasing taxes on people earning less than $400,000. He supports cutting taxes for working people and families with children to give them more breathing room.
Madam Secretary, does that mean that he will support the child tax credit to be made permanent at $2,000 that was put in the Trump tax cuts? Would the president support that? Because that affects working families.
The president has proposed in his most recent budget expanding the child tax credit and has supported the Wyden-Smith legislation that would increase the child tax credit now as well.
Would you say that that it would be true that leaving the Trump tax cuts expired means President Biden would roll back Republicans' guaranteed deduction, resulting in a tax increase of $3,373 for a family earning less than $75,000?
What I said, what the president has clearly articulated, is that no family earning under $400,000 will see their taxes go up in any set of proposals that the president is willing to
So I appreciate that. We have looked at every budget that has been presented, and you have called for the expiration of the 2017 tax cuts. But there is no plan, as you testified before the Senate Finance Committee, saying that the president has no plan in regards to how to make sure there's no tax increases less than $400,000. I would love and welcome, and I think the American people would welcome, a plan from the president. In fact, he loves to interject in all kinds of policies. I would think he would want to there. In testimony before the committee, former Senator Phil Gramm called the Biden administration's decision to cut out Congress and unilaterally negotiate a tax deal with bureaucrats in Europe, quote, the greatest abuse of the Constitution of the United States, close quote, was Senator Phil Gramm's comment when he testified here. Each of the Biden administration's failures at the OECD can be traced to its decision to act unilaterally and without Congress. Will you commit to reject any OECD profit reallocation plan that disproportionately impacts American companies or allow U.S. tax revenues to be stolen away by foreign governments?
Well, let me say that the administration, the Biden administration, has worked very closely with Congress to inform and get input on Congress's priorities to guide these negotiations over the last 3.5 years, and will continue to do that. And I strongly believe that the Pillar 2 agreement that's been reached is very much in support of goals that are good for this country. The United States has been the only country until this agreement was signed to impose a tax on the overseas profits of its multinationals. And what this agreement secured is that all countries now will tax the profits of their multinational companies, which creates a level playing field for American companies and will stop the race to the bottom. And the United States will benefit by adopting the minimum tax that's consistent with.
So,
the
Secretary
Pillar 2
Yellen,
agreement.
the communication from the very first time we ever had a conversation, I raised the issue, for example, of the research and development tax credit not being accounted for during OECD, but direct government subsidies of the Chinese Communist Party gets much more credit than our research and development tax credit. You said that you've worked with Congress. We've been raising that from day one. We've been providing how detrimental that would be to U.S. companies by empowering the Chinese, which you have visited that country several times in your tenure, which has empowered them, but you've done nothing in regards to that.
I'm sorry, but we have.
What have you done?
We are negotiating with other countries right now to try to get favorable treatment for the R&D tax credit, and I'm hopeful that these negotiations will be successful. And I would point out that other tax credits, including the green tax credits and credits affecting the low-income housing tax credit, have been codified as continuing under Pillar 2.
So I'll just reiterate again our concern with almost $200 billion leaving American companies and going to foreign nations under the plan that this administration negotiated with Europeans, that we are adamantly opposed to that. The Democrats' so-called Inflation Reduction Act that was supposed to prevent electric vehicle tax credits from going to foreign entities of concern in China and adversarial nations, but Treasury has created multiple loopholes that will send American taxpayer dollars to Chinese billionaires and Chinese manufacturers. Isn't it true that the foreign entity of concern rules written by your Treasury Department are more China favorable than the same foreign entity of concern standards from Biden's Commerce Department for semiconductors?
I believe that they're similar. These are very strong restrictions that, beginning this year and then continuing next year, preclude companies from receiving the $7,500 credit if this year they contain battery components that are have originated in a foreign entity of concern. And next year it will affect critical minerals in processing. We've worked very closely with the Department of Energy and the Department of Commerce. It has been an interagency work to formulate these FIAC rules in a way that will certainly restrict China from profiting from the tax credit.
I think it's pretty clear that Treasury's version of these rules would allow Chinese billionaires to receive hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars, as confirmed by the nonpartisan Joint Committee on Taxation. So in response to this committee, we recently passed the End Chinese Dominance of Electric Vehicles in America Act, led by Congresswoman Carol Miller, which would close those egregious loopholes and protect the American taxpayer. Treasury must do a better job of pushing back against our foreign adversaries. I now recognize the ranking member for questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Great job on China. You were firm, you were very strong, very assertive. IRA has worked. How about the harmonization of international tax rates so people don't seek the lowest tax jurisdiction, even though that's not where profits have been earned? Good work on the CHIPS Act. Really good work on the infrastructure bill, certainly the American Rescue Package. This is a great story for us to tell. So I want to give you some time to talk, Madam Secretary. implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act is really important. Let me give you a couple of minutes to talk about that.
Well, let me just start by saying that although there's still more work to do, we've made tremendous progress implementing it. We have completed more than 60 guidance projects, and these are all on critical and complex issues, and we've been focused on getting the issues right. This involves collaboration with the Department of Energy, with EPA,
Flood watch,
and other
Kansas,
experts to make sure
Missouri,
that we're implementing the law effectively and as intended. It's also tremendously important the impact that the IRA clean energy credits are having. We can see that they're catalyzing hundreds of billions of dollars of investment in cutting-edge clean energy technology and strengthening our supply chains, and at the same time lowering emissions in line with our climate goals and creating good jobs across the country, and particularly in parts of the country that really have not seen a lot of burst of economic activity. Treasury has been doing research on the impact of the Act, and what we find is that investment is especially strong in communities that have not seen a lot of investment, that have lower income and a smaller fraction of college-educated workers. So this is making a huge difference. The response has been enormous, and I've had the privilege of seeing many of the projects that are being spurred, as well as training that's taking place. I've had the privilege of visiting many workforce training programs that have been started to give our workers the skills to fill the good, high-wage jobs that are being created by this IRA.
Thanks. And could you speak to labor participation rates?
Yes. Labor force participation rates actually have moved up substantially. For adult workers, male and female, they have now exceeded the where they were pre-pandemic. They're moved up a great deal, and overall have moved up as well. And there is a downward trend that we see in labor force participation due to demographics, but this is really offsetting that. And this means not only more people working, and also in response to higher real or inflation-adjusted wages, it also alleviates supply constraints, and it's one of the factors that's enabled our economy to grow last year, for example, at 3%, and to create more than 200,000 jobs a month on a consistent basis.
9 million jobs every day in America go unanswered, as we know, and that's part of the skills alignment that you've just spoken to. Better job for all of us is required, perhaps through community colleges. But just as I close out, and I thank you for your testimony, I also want to point out something else. Everybody on this committee during my time objected to Chinese efforts to manipulate currency. So hearing now that the former administration is talking about the idea that they might manipulate currency, they might threaten the independence of the Federal Reserve Board. I never thought the day would come when it would be Democrats standing up for the independence of the Federal Reserve Board before our Republican colleagues, and consistently both parties stood up against Chinese currency manipulation, and you were a very remarkable part of that. So we thank you for your testimony. Delighted you're here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I now recognize the Vice Chairman of the committee, Mr. Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. We appreciate your service. A lot of you have had an opportunity to work with you over the years. I want to touch on two things and have a little bit of a conversation. IMF came out a couple of days ago with a report. They're very concerned about where we're at financially. My background before I got here, 30 years in business, a lot of entities, basically hundreds and hundreds of balance sheets and income statements. I'm very concerned as well, because at some point, 49 out of 50 governors have to balance the budget. You can't continue down this road. Now, they're concerned because our deficit this year went from 1.4 trillion last year to 1.7. Interest on the debt, as you know, is close to $1 trillion. I've been here long enough, not quite 20 years, but been here long enough to clearly know that in the last 20 years, it's over $20 trillion in debt. Now, there's a lot of finger pointing going on, but we need to find a way to work together. It's got to be dealt with at some point. I know you've laid something out, but I've heard these stories, not so much from you, but others, about pretty pictures down the road. But I look around the room here, and I have 10 grandkids, and I look around the room, there's a lot of kids in here under 30. And we're spending their money, and we got to get very real about it. If you're in the state of Florida, one thing they have to do is pass a balanced budget amendment. That's the only thing they have to do, but they have to do that. And by the way, 49 out of 50 governors have to do the same thing. So I guess I ask you, what's your feeling about the IMF and their report a couple of days ago where they're very concerned about where we're at financially and where we're going?
Well, I would say I'm not terribly concerned about where we are, but I do have concern about where we're going unless we undertake some significant steps to reduce the budget deficit.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm
And
Eric
if you look
Fitzgerald,
at the
Assistant Chief with the Austin Police Department.
2025 budget,
I want to start out
you'll
by
see
thanking our
that
patrol
he's
officers and our organized
proposed
crime division
$3
detectives,
trillion
as well as our public safety partners, Austin Travis County EMS and Austin Fire Department. Their combined efforts undoubtedly reduced the number of deaths that we have experienced and seen over the last 30 hours. During this period of time, a number of our officers administered multiple doses at various scenes, which helped save the lives prior to our public safety partners arriving on scene. Additionally, we've seen civilians jump into action and intervene by administering Narcan on some of these scenes. Since October of 2021, the Austin Police Department is fortunate enough to be trained and to have our officers administer Narcan in situations just like this. And as you can see, this has made a significant impact. At this time,
Watch.
it is apparent
Oklahoma.
that there is a deadly batch of illicit narcotics in our community. Our intent at the Austin Police Department is to find those persons responsible and hold them accountable. Again, I want to thank all of the officers for their quick response and tremendous work in addressing this immediate threat to our community and public safety. Now, I'd like to introduce Lieutenant Pat Eastlick. He is with our Organized Crime Division Narcotics Support Unit. He is going to go into the update on where the investigation is at this point. I want to remind everyone that this is an active, ongoing investigation. There are some details that we need to withhold to ensure the integrity of the investigation.
Good afternoon. Detectives yesterday were notified by officers from the Downtown Area Command concerning an increase of overdoses within a short period of time. Detectives from the Narcotics Support Unit responded downtown to investigate the source of these narcotics. During the course of their investigation, 2 individuals were detained and 1 resulting in an arrest for felon in possession of a firearm. Further investigation is needed for additional charges on these individuals. The APD Narcotics Support Unit is investigating the source of the illicit narcotics and working to identify any potential dealer or dealers. Our partners with the Drug Enforcement Administration and the Assistant United States Attorney's Office have also offered their support also in this investigation. Anyone found responsible for distributing the suspected fentanyl faces potential charges of murder or manufacture or delivery of a controlled substance causing death or serious bodily injury. Fentanyl overdoses have had an effect on this community and is a major concern of the Austin Police Department. APD Narcotics Support Unit actively investigates fentanyl overdose deaths for the purpose of holding the dealers of this deadly drug accountable. To date, the Narcotics Support Unit has filed 5 charges related to fentanyl overdose deaths. And now I'd like to turn it over to Austin Travis County Health Authority, Dr. Walks.
Good afternoon. We've lost mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters due to the events of yesterday. And I come to you today to stress the most important thing that I can to anyone that's listening to us today. Anyone can be a victim of an overdose. If you're using or fighting an addiction, you should never use by yourself. Have a family member or a friend with you.
Severe thunderstorm warning.
And call 911
Pennsylvania.
To save your life. It is also important that all of us know the signs of an overdose so that we can take action as soon as possible and call 911 immediately. So those signs are small pupils, slow breathing or not breathing at all, cool and pale skin, and not responding or very low response level to stimulus. Don't hesitate to act if you're not quite sure. Giving naloxone will save a life. Austin Public Health has been receiving funding from Congressman Lloyd Doggett through the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, to combat this crisis. And as was said earlier, that has gone a long way to help us prepare for days such as what we had yesterday. This funding of over $2 million
Flood
has
warning.
allowed us to allocate
Idaho.
30,000 doses of naloxone to various community members, and it is also supporting our community's efforts to support peer recovery specialists and harm reduction teams in our partner organizations, Communities for Recovery and Texas Harm Reduction Alliance, to name a few. This funding also supports addiction treatment and harm reduction training through the University of Texas at Austin School of Pharmacy, through teams that are training local providers in emergency rooms and in primary care offices on the things that they can do to prevent and treat addiction. Finally, we are providing overdose awareness campaigns throughout our community. I'm going to end this statement by repeating myself. Anyone can be a victim of an overdose. Never take drugs alone. If you think someone may be overdosing, call 911 and take steps. And if you're carrying naloxone, use it. You could save a life. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Keith Pinkard, Chief Medical Examiner for Travis County. Beginning at approximately 1 a.m. on Monday morning through about 4 a.m. this morning, so about a 27-hour period, we have been involved in the investigation of 8 sudden unexpected deaths that are suspicious for drug overdose deaths. Our investigation at the Travis County Medical Examiner's Office involves going to the scene of the event and investigating the scene, circumstances, and history surrounding that event to put it into context within the broader picture of our death investigation and autopsy. The 8 cases that we are currently investigating were located downtown and in south, east, and northern parts of Austin. Some of them were transient individuals, and the histories provided raised suspicion that these cases may in fact be to drug overdoses. Some of the decedents were actually with other individuals who were also using substances, and those other individuals were taken to hospitals for treatment. The autopsies on all 8 of those individuals were conducted either yesterday or today. In fact, some of them are going on right now. The autopsy does take some time to complete. However, we also have our own toxicology lab where the toxicology testing will be taking place, and we hope to get preliminary results on what may have been in their systems in the next couple of days.
Thank you. All right, that's everyone has statements, but if y'all have questions.
There are 8 deaths that have occurred in that 27-hour period that I just referenced. Whether or not they are all, in fact, drug-related deaths, we'll have to wait until the toxicology testing and the completion of the autopsy reports. We are investigating those 8 deaths as suspicious.
Yeah, are you going to touch on the specific types of substances involved and whether there is one substance that is more adult-rated than the other ones?
So you're waiting on the toxicology to be able to answer that question. Do y'all have any response on that?
As of right now, we don't know the exact substance, but based on the symptoms that were being showed from the victims, we do believe it's some sort of opioid.
Dr. Pinkard?
In the deaths that we are investigating, some very just general information. Not all of the people are identified. And in general, the age ranges are from the mid-30s to the mid-50s. That's all I have.
I can speak to some of the demographics as far as the people that were experiencing an overdose. Fortunately, to date, no pediatric patients. However, the age ranges did vary from 20s to 50s and across all ethnic demographics as well. For people experiencing the overdoses, there were patients that were unhoused. There were patients that were housed. There were patients that were at their workplace, and there were patients that were out in public accessible spaces as well. It was not limited to one geographic location. We did notice that there were some spots that had a higher density of overdoses, but it was spread throughout the entire city.
It's still too early to make that determination, but it's not common to see it in one location and then pop up in others. But right now, we're not sure.
Okay, we're talking about this kind of following, but you did mention opioid. Do we believe suspected fentanyl is involved?
Based on the trends of what's going on with the opioid, I cannot say the word, sorry, incidents that we're having, it's most likely going to be fentanyl. But until we get toxicology from the ME's office, we can't say for certain. They are persons of interest in it. The detectives have to go through mountains of evidence to be able to come up with the probable cause to potentially charge them further.
I know you're early in the investigation, but can you tell us, does this look like something that was manufactured here in the Austin area or came in from somewhere else as far as the drugs that are talking about?
We're unable to know that right now.
So you've seen an increase in these calls. Have you started to see a decrease since the last few days?
I'm not sure currently. That would probably be for EMS on the frequency of the calls right now.
When we started seeing the increase in opiate calls, that was really between 9 and 10 a.m. yesterday. About 10 to 11 p.m. last night is when we started to see it decrease. Then it continued to decrease overnight, and then a slight bump this morning. But it is a significantly lower number today than it was yesterday.
Yes, there are free Narcan kits at dispensing machine dispensers across the city, and people that have MAP cards can get free Narcan at HEB locations and at community care pharmacies.
How many ODs that occurred
So out of the 51 overdoses that we responded to yesterday, only 4 did not survive.
Patrol officers were the ones to ensure health safety people. Do all patrol officers carry Narcan on them?
So, as I said, in 2021, we began that program. We make it available. They're able to check it out at our PCO, property control offices. Many of them do, and in this instance, we'll make reminders for all officers to start checking that out and carry it on them. We don't.
I just want to clarify the difference between the 4 confirmed deaths and the 8 that are being investigated. Are those additional 4 of that 8 not part of the 51?
The 4 deaths that I'm referring to are patients that we actually attempted to resuscitate and save, and were unable to. It is the 4 that are inside of the deaths that are being reported here. So it's not in addition, it's part of the larger number, but it is 4 that we were unable to revive.
Okay, so all 8 of those are part of that 51?
I'm not sure if the 51 are all reflected into that because we don't compare demographic data at this time, but that's something that we will have eventually.
Just need clarification on the charges and 2 persons of interest. You said 5 charges were filed. Can you please clarify? Because I feel like that's
Right. So for the incident yesterday, the investigation of the Narcotics Support Unit, 1 charge was filed on 1 individual for felon in possession of a firearm. Now, they're going to continue their investigation with potential charges, and those charges can range from anywhere from possession or delivery of a controlled substance all the way up to murder or delivery of a controlled substance causing serious bodily injury or death.
And that's all to 1 individual, or was it another person?
There were 2 people detained at that time, so we're not ruling out anybody. During our investigation, if more come up, we're definitely going to be addressing that as well.
No identity of the enemy or no chance? Is there still person of interest?
Correct.
Thank you all. If you all need anything else, please feel free to follow up with. We'll do that afterwards, but just let me know if you all need anything else.
And just one thing, just want to give a thank you to the Texas Harm Reduction Alliance that a couple of years ago invited me, Commissioner Gomez, Dr. Walk, some others to a town hall where they demanded a response from the city and the county on this. And I think had they not done that, frankly, we wouldn't have been as prepared as the EMS chief told us, and it would have been much worse. So I want to give a thank you to that group, not only for that activism, but also for the work that they're doing to hand out Narcan and the other community groups that I mentioned earlier. But thank you all very much.
Take everything about 86 Street.
Yeah, you take Spanish Harlem. Yeah. You take.
Take the Bronx.
Bronx is mine.
Bronx is yours.
Yes. I got.
Take Connecticut.
You got Chelsea. I'll get Connecticut.
I'll take the West.
Pick your neighbor.
Right, exactly, right? You're Brooklyn.
Queens, man.
Sorry, I just moved the wire.
How about Lower East Side? Lower East Side. You got it.
It's right back in the courthouse.
You give that to you. Come on.
Yeah, it's right back in the courthouse.
Holy square. Holy square. Collect Pond Park. That sounds like a concept.
Nice tattoo.
Mustache. He's not like, there's no like, it's just a form letter they're all getting that. Yeah. I was there in the morning for that. Exactly. They're just, they are, I take 10 minutes for like, yeah, no, radio. I they don't have a very large system.
No, I mean, no. Everyone was caught off guard.
Severe thunderstorm warning. Pennsylvania.
Oh my God, it's like dinner. Yeah, there was. And then, yeah.
I would have thrown a battery at his head.
And then the other scene when this essentially she's live. She was active shooter, active shooter. Oh yeah. Active for you. Yeah.
I mean, I've read most people who's like very, I'm the mom.
I heard those.
That's what I recall. I mean, I thought Lydia's
Yeah, that was terrible. Remind me never to let myself on fire near you, man. Yeah. He was too involved.
Who got the email for this? Yeah, did anybody confirm who we're actually
Yeah.
talking to?
Yeah, I was on it.
This could just be a neighborhood guy named Rick.
Right.
You know who we're
Right now, we're all down here and they're all being locked up.
Who got an official email? Oh, no, I'm serious. Did anybody get a real email? Why is no one? Okay.
You got it? Sharif. Sharif? Who? Sharif? Yeah. She's coming?
No, not that Sharif. No, the organizer.
The student organizer?
Oh.
Yeah, he wears glasses a lot. Where is he? That's a good question. But why here? Yeah.
Do we have an official
Why here?